well. Okay, sorry. So to start your thinking, I want you to write down your data collection tools and also a sentence to explain or justify why you're using those tools. It's a really important part of your research design, and you'll see why soon, how it all connects with your results in your discussion, of course. And write down how you plan to, or you've already analysed your data. If you can do that in a sentence, that'd be great, and then we'll use those shortly. Okay. So, and everyone can see my screen, okay? I would say yes. Okay, so our goals today is looking at strategies to present your research results in a clear way. We're looking at synthesizing your findings with previous research, which is a really important part of your discussion chapter, and how to critically discuss your research results using evidence. So it is common for these two chapters to be quite challenging for students, and like all of your thesis chapters, there's a lot of work that goes into the finished product. So it does take a lot of planning about how to structure and present everything in a clear way. So the aim today is a little bit of a pep talk, I guess, to get you confident and to really encourage you to start your planning, even if you're not quite at the data collection stage. So we've got our welcome now. We're just going to look at some key terms in a second. We've got our first session, strategies to present research results. We've got a peer discussion in our breakout rooms, and then we'll come back for a strategies to synthesize and critically discuss. And we've got a Q&A at the end as well. So hopefully you can stay for that. So just some quick definitions here. So a finding and a result are slightly different. So the finding is the information you discover from an examination of a problem, and the result is what you discover after examining what you find. That's a very broad way to explain it. Now let's have a look. One of the other differences that could be important for you is that findings is often the term used for qualitative studies and results for quantitative studies. Now this is a little bit old school, so if you don't like doing that, then that's okay these days. It's important to note, whichever you choose though, be consistent. You could find your supervisors have a preference as to which you use the most, and also your field of study will have conventions as well, so keep that in mind as well. And one of the other reasons why it's not as strict a rule as it used to be is there's so many mixed studies now, so mixing the qual and the quant, so that's why there's a little bit more of a relaxation around that hard rule, let's say. So what's the difference between your results and your discussion? The results are the findings that you've gathered, okay, and analysed. It's no bias, no interpretation. It's just, this is what I have found. These are the facts. Your discussion is where you go in deep, where your critical analysis comes in, where you explain and interpret why those results were what you found and what they mean. And really importantly, as always, is how they are significant and how they are valuable for your field of study. So keep that really clear in your mind, that the results are without the interpretation. It's just what you found. So can you combine your results and discussion? So like I just said, the short answer is no. So they're two different parts of the thesis, and they have really distinct purposes. So that's because you need to report the results so that the reader can make their own interpretations and come up with their ideas and their thoughts. However, it doesn't mean that you have to have the two separate, chapters. There's not that rule, but you still have to at some point just present the data, and then you could discuss it straight afterwards if you want to structure it like that. We're going to have a little bit a look at that in a minute, but they still need to be separated. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you don't have two separate chapters for them, but there has to be a clear part where you present the data and let the reader have a look and make their own judgments, and then you're going to tell them about your judgments, and hopefully everybody will agree, but you're going to have very good evidence, and your readers will be convinced by your brilliant writing. So some more quick terminology as well. Research design, that's the overall approach that you're using, okay? It's a sequence of steps from beginning to end, and how you achieve your research aims. Your methodology, it's the philosophy of how new knowledge is gained, okay? So remember what we said before, there's two different thoughts. There's the qualitative and the quantitative, which you would already be aware of, and also mixed methods, of course. So the methodology is the philosophy about how we gain that knowledge. Your methods are the strategies to obtain evidence. So they're your instruments, your data collection tools, your data analysis, and how you're doing your sampling. All right. So with the philosophies, obviously for qualitative researchers are looking at reality as being subjective and socially constructed. Your quantitative researchers, they believe that reality is objective and it's measurable, using experiments, surveys, controlled observations, those sorts of data collection tools. So they are quite different, but as we said before, a lot of the time now they are being mixed so that they can complement each other, because they both have their advantages and their disadvantages. So that's why researchers are mixing them these days quite a lot. If you're not mixing, that's totally fine. All right, but just be clear that methodology and methods are two different things. All right, also respondents and participants also mean two different things. So be aware of that. Your respondents are your survey respondents, and your participants are for your qualitative data collection. So don't mix those two up. That's an important distinction there. All right, so another really common problem is drowning in the data. All right, you are going to collect a lot of information. You need to be so organized in how you store and manage it. That is going to give you the good start for your results and your discussion as well. You can't include everything, but know where it all is, never delete, because you might be able to use it for a paper or another research project another time. So that data analysis stage of your research design is the start of making sense of your data. What does it all mean? You need to be reflective and be patient. It takes a lot of thinking and a lot of time, and this is really normal. But you will have a lot of thoughts, write them down, okay? You will forget. If you're in the lab and you're in the middle of the experiment and you have an idea and you think, oh, I'll write that down later, you'll forget. So my biggest advice is write everything down. Put notes into your phone, whatever it is that you have handy. I used to sleep with a post-it notes beside my bed so I could write things down. Okay, if you're doing the mixed methodology or multiple phases, it's really important that you remind the reader and understand yourself when and how you are mixing the data. Okay, is it in the analysis stage, or is it not till you start to the discussion to answer the research questions? That needs to be really clear, and it's part of your research design, and it will influence how you present the results. But maybe if you are doing mixed methodology or multiple phases, that could be the idea of how you are going to structure your results, and we'll look at that in a minute. Okay, so be really clear on how and when you're mixing that data. That's going to play a very big role in how you present everything. So let's have a look what examiners look for. They want a thesis that has a well-explained and justified research design. Makes sense, doesn't it? You're going to do that in your methods section. You have to keep that up, though, in your results and remind the reader every time what your research design was. Multiple sources, someone's put in a chat. For example, I interviewed 2 different groups. Yeah, that's exactly the same. Where are you mixing those? At what point are you mixing them? To answer a research question, or everyone has multiple sources, more than one data collection tool. So that's what I'm saying. Have a think about how you are using that data, okay? Because that's going to help you to structure your results section. So with the examiners, the research design, your methods chapter is going to be really sound. Make sure you carry that into your results to keep reminding them of what you've done and how you collected and found and analyzed that data. They really want you to engage with the findings, but at the same time, you can't go past the evidence. For everything that you claim, there needs to be the evidence from what you collected. They want you to use the literature in your discussion. We're going to talk about that later as well. And they do get annoyed and distracted by presentation errors. All right, we've talked about that before. But if presentation is really good, then they're going to enjoy reading your thesis. Okay, it's no doubt about that. So that's from an article that actually went and interviewed and examined a whole lot of examiners' work and comments. All right, so how do we present clear research results? So it's your key findings, all right? As we said, you can't include everything. It has to be everything that answers your research questions. Try not to go too far away from that. Remember your first 3 chapters, you've set up this beautiful research story. It's been very clear. You've justified it. You've set up the problem. You've said this is important research and why it is. So you need to continue that story all the way through. So your findings are your observed facts. Remember what we said before. You cannot put your interpretation in there. You could say a sentence, you could put some interview data and say this reflects the interviewee's confidence in what they're doing or whatever. You can make that very broad comment, but you can't interpret what it means. That's for the discussion. They're very separate. Could be in the same chapter, as I said, but keep them separate. Because the reader, give them the opportunity to look at the data, okay, before you put down what you think the data means. So your results are not actually the proof, okay? They're the evidence and you're laying it out, but you haven't said the evidence of what yet. That's in your discussion. So it's really part of your building blocks for yourself as well to figure out what are your understandings from this evidence. So that's why you need to keep them separate, okay? As I said, doesn't have to be separate chapters, but they do need to be separated because this is what the data found and this is what the analysis showed, and then you're going to say later on what it all means. So how are we going to structure? My advice is figure it out early on, have some kind of draft. You would have to do that for your research proposal anyway, but you do need to be flexible. Obviously, you're going to have a few different ideas as you progress. But if you have a starting point, you can at least have some draft subheadings and some dot points and then change if you need to down the track. If you don't have a starting point, you're going to have a big mess. Okay, so have some kind of structure when we're going to look at some possible ones in a minute. Ask your supervisors what they think, what is a good way to present and analyze the data. We're going to have a look at the QUT templates where they are again. They've got some really good guidance there. And of course, please use the QUT thesis repository and read what other students do and how they write their results and discussions. Really important part of your work to get this organised. Your big picture, we talk about that a lot. What is your big picture? What does your research mean? What is the significance? So use that to guide you initially. That could be a way. You could be guided by, as we said, your research design, a conceptual framework, or whatever you think makes sense initially, but have a plan from the beginning. So here's some possible options. Traditionally, as you would know, introduction, literature review, research methods, results, discussion, conclusion. Perfectly fine to go ahead with that. If you've got multiple phases or the mixed methods, you might decide to have those first. I've missed out the methods there. You'd have introduction, lit review and methods, but then you might have your phase 1 results and discussion, your phase 2 results and discussion, your phase 3 results and discussion, and then your conclusion. Maybe you're going to respond via your research questions. That's always a good idea as well. If you think it's going to fit for you, if you only have one research question, might not work as well. If you're doing thesis by publication, each article will have its own results and discussion, won't it? But at some point you will bring those together depending on how many you have and where you're putting your separate chapters in to tie it all together. So hopefully you already know, but if you don't know, we're very excited because on HiQ there's a new widget that you can put onto your dashboard for those HiQ pages for you guys, those 4 research student pages. So you'll see it come up and you just select it and add it to your Launchpad, and that'll make it really easy for you to find all the GRE+D and HDR support. So here's where you need to go. So you've got your candidature. You can see that that's one of the tiles that we have. Your candidature, your thesis. You go to writing a thesis, and you can see they're formatting your thesis. Okay, and that's what it looks like. And you can see there's 2 thesis templates. They might guide you on how to set up your results and your discussion as well. Okay, so there's lots of different ways. You're going to have a bit of trial and error, but you'll be fine. So how do we get started? I know I said before you can't include everything, but at the start you should. All right, you can always take it out later. All right, just write everything that you think, put your subheadings that you think are going to work, and pull each variable, component, concept, your themes, pull them all apart. They could be your subheadings. Create some kind of roadmap or a mind map or a table or some kind of thing to keep everything in order so you can step back and look at that big picture. Otherwise, you're going to be, as we said before, drowning in the data. You're going to be looking for patterns and themes. Maybe you're going to have some themes that could be put together, you know, and that might make your writing a bit more concise. That could be, if you look at the broader view, there could be some findings you can join together. So it's finding that balance. You need to be clear to the reader, but you also need to be concise. You can't waffle on for 20 pages of, you know, tables or figures or a whole lot of information. It has to be presented in a clear way that you're going to keep the reader engaged. You also need to provide enough information for people who are unfamiliar with your field of study. So again, explaining everything for the reader. If you can, try to structure your results and discussion in a similar way. So if you're doing it thematically, keep those themes. Or if you're doing it via research questions, keep that, that structure if you can. It makes it much easier for the reader and for you as well. Okay, seek feedback as well. You know, send your reader, your supervisor, 10 pages of something and say, how's this looking? Does it look logical? Does it look clear? Is there too much information? Is there not enough information? You really need that feedback. So as with everything, we're keeping the reader informed. You need that initial paragraph. I often get into a results chapter that someone has written or a results section. Okay, just got a question about APA 6 being on the HiQ pages. That would be a library thing. I think if you go into the library, they would have the updated 7th edition. My advice is just go straight to APA. That's where I go. I've got it, the link there. Just go straight to the APA 7 and you'll find everything out that you need there. So keeping the reader informed is important, especially at the beginning. As I said, I read a lot where students dive straight into the results. This study found, okay, you can't do that. You need to lead the reader in, and we're going to look at an example in a minute. You know, you can always refer back to, don't forget that. If you've already given a very detailed explanation of something in your lit review or your methods, tell the reader that. Give them one sentence to briefly explain, and then you've got that example there. You can do something like this, where you say detailed descriptions are presented in chapter whatever, and then tell them which section, you know, and it's up to the reader then. If they want to go back, they can. So how do we stay on track? You're going to have some unexpected findings. If you feel like you've gone away from your research questions or your aims, that's okay. Don't panic. Maybe you can still use those. So keep them there, keep thinking, and then see how you go as you proceed. Maybe you won't be able to use them, but maybe you will. Maybe it'll be worth pursuing. If you have negative results, so something that you think, oh, this actually disproves what I was thinking, again, initially don't ignore them. Go through, keep thinking, keep analysing. You never know, perhaps you can have some perspective where it will help your argument. While you're presenting the results, I know this happened to me where I would be presenting the results and then I would find myself discussing them. That's okay. Keep going, and you can pull it out and put it in a separate section later. Don't stop and say, oh, I can't do that now. Keep with your flow, okay? Remember, you can always move all the text around if you need to. You will have to go back to your initial chapters and read them and read again and move things around and add things and take things out, all right? As with all of your chapters and your whole thesis, it's iterative. You're going backwards and forwards constantly. Sometime, just before you submit, you will have to let go, but initially you are just going backwards and forwards and reminding yourself, oh yeah, I said that. That was a really good point. I must remember to put that in my results or my discussion. Okay, so, and you will need to go back and add to the lit review and introduction if you have unexpected findings. You might even have to go back to your methods if you realize you haven't explained something well enough. Another really important tip is the non-textual elements. So that's figures, tables, images, diagrams, maps, whatever you can to help the reader quickly gain an overview. There's rules around using these non-textual elements, so make sure you check with your referencing style what the rules are for labeling and numbering them and how to set them out. But the rule of thumb is always introduce them. Okay, figure 3 below shows something, then you give the figure, and then you have to have writing afterwards. You have to give an explanation of what you want the reader to notice. All right, if you just sit it there and don't say anything about it, as the reader, we're saying, okay, great, but so what? So you highlight the main points. It only has to be a few sentences, but it is important to do that process. All right, tense. I know, seems obvious, but it's something that I find that students struggle with a lot. It's simple past tense to report your findings. It has to be. What else could it be? You did it in the past. You collected the data in the past. 10 of the interviewees reported something. It was observed during the experiment that. It just has to be simple past tense. For your tables and figures, when you introduce them, it has to be present tense. The reader is looking at it now. All right, we'll look at an example in a minute. When you're explaining below the table or the figure, you can be in simple past because they've already seen it, or you might be in present perfect. So as figure 3 has shown, something, something, something. Okay, tense is common sense, but you know, we're going in and out of all of the tenses. So sometimes it's good to have a quick reminder. Interview data, okay. Be consistent. Each field of study will have a different way. Your supervisors might have a way that they want you to do it, but a couple of ideas are here. If it's a short excerpt, you're only taking a few words, put it into a sentence. So here's an example here. Tom described his first semester, so this is from interview data with international students. Tom described his first semester course results as not really good, but okay. I studied hard. Camilla mentioned she was used to receiving higher marks in Brazil, but I did my best, so these results were all right. All right, so what do you notice there? The tense is the same, isn't it? Through the sentence. I can't say Tom describes his first semester course results as not really good. I studied hard. You can't mix past and present. So bear that in mind. Sometimes it's a bit fiddly when you're going to put it into a sentence. If you have a longer excerpt, you need to pull it out and indent it, all right? again, just check with your referencing conventions, but that is normally the rule of thumb. So you still start with a sentence. You don't just put it there with no context. Despite failing one course, Tom remained positive about his studies. And this is what he said. Okay, so see how it's pulled out and it's indented in, no quotation marks either. Okay, you don't need those when you've got the large excerpts. That's in APA style. Double check your other styles. Okay, so that's the first session. Now we're going to do our breakouts. Just give me one. All right, just wait for everybody to come back. Yep, here we go. Don't forget to turn your microphones and cameras back off for me, would be great. Excellent. Here you all are. All right, so while we wait for everybody to come back, everybody's coming back slowly. I'm going to share my screen, and what we're going to do now is, now that you've all had a chat about your data collection tools and your analysis, we're going to have a look at an exemplar. And as always, I'm not saying this is the most brilliant exemplar that there is, but it's going to give you some tips about the things that we just discussed, all right? So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. There we go. So can you see the chapter 4 research findings? Okay. Hopefully that's a yes. All right, so what I would like for you to do is have a read through. So obviously this is this, well, not obviously, but this is the first paragraph. Remember how I was saying how important it is to set up your findings, to remind the reader of everything that's important to your study. So have a look through. What I would like you to notice is what's going on in sentence 1, 2, and 3. What are they doing? What's their purpose? And also have a look at sentence 6 as well and see what's happening there. And then we'll run through. Don't forget your cameras to go off. If your cameras are on, sometimes you'll come up in the recording. So good idea to switch it off if you can. Increase the size. Yes, I can. How's that? Is that a little bit better? I want you to be able to see the whole thing. So actually what I can do is that. There we go. Is that better? Hopefully, yes. While you're reading also, I just wanted to mention about those templates with the having APA 6. Really, APA 7 hasn't changed that much. Clearly those haven't been updated to APA 7, and they do need to be. But as researchers, you know, you can think critically and you can have a look at those and check if there's been any changes. From what I know, those basic things about structuring are still the same. Okay, but yes, you would want to double check, and I will definitely get onto that and make sure that those are updated as soon as possible. All right, so feel free to add anything into the chat if you want to. Sentence 1, what are you noticing? What is it telling us? It's telling us what the study did, right? It's the first sentence. Okay, so as the reader, how do you feel? You know what's going on. Okay, what do you notice about the tense? I just highlighted the word. Now, this is a final master's dissertation, so it's in past tense. This study examined, all right? If you wanted, you could say this study has examined, perfectly fine. Could you say this study examines? You've already done it, okay? So think about your tense there. What about sentence number 2? What's it doing? Anybody want to say in the chat? Setting up our gap, isn't it? It's telling us what the aim of the research is, that there's little empirical research on this topic. Okay, good. What about this one? It's telling us the aim and what's going on in the chapter. Again, important. Now, obviously, the findings are in one chapter in this one. As we said, you may not end up structuring that way, and that's okay. All right, so then you'd have a different kind of sentence. You'd say this chapter reports, firstly, the findings, and then provides a discussion. Now, what do we notice about the tense? It's in present tense. The reader is reading now. You don't, please, I beg you, please do not say this chapter will report. There is absolutely no reason to have that word will in there. It's my pet hate. You can ask Tasha. This chapter reports. You're in present tense. It's happening right now. Okay. Yeah, it identifies the gap in the research, definitely. What about sentence 4? The findings are presented in 3 sections. Keep the reader in the loop. Simple as that, right? First section shows, again, we're in present tense. Yeah, the way of reporting the chapter. Beautiful, thank you. Now, what do you notice here? Observation data. All right, you're telling, oh, that's right, there was observation data, and that was explained in the methods section, which we haven't read, but the reader would have. And there was 3 one-to-one consultations, audio recorded. Righto, good information there. We're clear, aren't we? Next, so that's the next section. The main findings from the thematic analysis, all right, telling us some more information about the research design of the consultations. And the teacher and student interviews. More data collection. Presented, present tense, to provide an in-depth understanding of the teaching strategies and student-teacher interactions that occur. Now, why do we want to have that in-depth understanding? Because we don't have enough empirical research. So see the thread, it's going through, isn't it? Now, this paragraph seems very simple, doesn't it? Would have taken a long time to write, okay? Lots of refining, lots of checking. But maybe you can pump out that beautiful paragraph right at the beginning. Hopefully you can. But also remember, you're going to have to refine it depending on what you actually present. The final section presents the findings from the discourse analysis. So there was what? Thematic analysis and discourse analysis. Tables and figures. There are non-textual elements, aren't they? Have been used. Have been used. I think that's okay. Could we say are used? Probably yes, would probably be better, to be honest, to present the data as well as excerpts from the interviews. Okay, cool. In the transcribed consultation excerpts, T is used to represent when the teacher is speaking and S when the student is speaking. So just giving the reader a rundown of what they're going to see. All right, now, here's an example. Remember we were talking about the non-textual elements, and I said how important it is to introduce and then present it. All right, so this is an example. It's just pulled out, okay? There's no before and after at this stage of what came before and after, but you can see. Remember what's about teaching strategies. Evidence of all 5 of the teaching strategies highlighted in the Lit Review was found in the thematic analysis. These were, so we've listed them there, nice. Figure 3 presents, present tense, the percentage of time the teachers spent using each strategy in their consultations. Now, what do you think about the figure? It's all right. It's a bit squishy here, isn't it? Probably could have been formatted better. The color's clear. What do you notice here? The axis here, there's the percentages, and then the axis here is saying what each one means. Make sure you have information on all of your axes, all of them, the 2 of them. Okay, they need to be clear. So we can look at that and we can go, oh, okay, percentage of time, good. And we can go, oh, look, feedback on grammar errors, nearly 50% in consultation 3. That's high. All right, notice my label. Now, this would be APA 6 style. I don't think it's changed from APA 7. You really need to double check and make sure you label your tables and figures correctly. Tables are labeled for APA above, figures are below. All right. figure capitalized, all right? But as I said, this is APA 6, probably should have updated for APA 7. Is there a general rule of how far the figure can be from where it is first referenced? Not far, all right? As close as you can. It can be a juggle, but as close as you can. The reader cannot work hard, all right? On the same page, I would definitely say. The fonts between the body and diagram should be the same. Yes, they should. And I don't think that's, well, depends. Depends what your referencing style says. Follow that, okay? All right, so afterwards, we need to tell the reader what we want them to notice. Now, it's pretty noticeable anyway, isn't it? Feedback on grammar errors, main strategy being used. Look at all the time being spent. Which one's the least? Modeling. Here, here, here. Okay, but we can't let the reader figure that out for themselves. We have to lead them through, and we need to give them a little spiel to tell them what we want to know. There we go, as shown in figure 3, present perfect. If you want present tense, it would be fine, all right, as figure 3 shows. But mix up your verbs, all right? What did we put up here? Presents. Okay, so that's okay, mixing it up. It's boring if you don't mix it up. Okay, so be really mindful of having properly formatted and very clear tables and figures, and follow the conventions of your referencing style. A lot of people don't know that referencing style is not just about your citations, it's about everything. It governs your whole document. Okay, now, what if you're presenting interview data and recorded data? Same thing. Here's my theme, but we need to be very clear. So here's my theme, all right? Here's my little spiel here. Teaching deep learning was a strategy implemented in all 3 of the audio recorded consultations. We just saw that, didn't we, in the table? From the teacher's perspectives, how are we knowing their perspectives? Because we interviewed them. They believe that teaching the students deep learning skills is an important part of their role in one-to-one writing consultations. Now, what are you noticing about the tense? Not in past, is it? No. Why? Why is it possible not to have it in past, even though I said before when you're reporting what they said, you have to be in past? Well, it's okay to be in present here because we can make the assumption that the teachers still believe this, even though they said it in the past in an interview. This is pulling out an excerpt. It's not directly reporting the interviewees said ... Okay, so it's okay to have present tense here. Now, what do you notice? We've got teacher 1, we've got teacher 2, indented, isn't it? Justified on each side. We have got the quotation marks this time. We've also got a full stop and italicized. So different to the example that I showed you because they were from 2 different documents. All right. Now, if you like it italicized, do it, but you have to be consistent. Okay. If you don't like it italicized or it goes against your referencing conventions, then that's okay too. It's up to you, but it has to be clear. All right. But we can read that very well as the reader, and we can make our own opinions about what the teacher's perspectives were. That's what we want. Remember that this is the findings where the reader needs to make their own conclusions as well as the ones you're going to give them. So remember what we were saying, how we've got different data collection methods and how are you going to combine them? Here's an example of how to combine them. So we've got interview data here, and then we've got an excerpt to provide more evidence from the consultation. So not only have we got the interview data, we've got the data from the excerpts from the recordings. The following excerpt is an illustration of deep learning, as the teacher is adding to the student's knowledge with the discussion on referencing and introductions and academic that will be relevant for future assignments. And then we've got the excerpt from the interview data. Now, what do you notice there? The line numbers. When you transcribe, you have to put all these line numbers, because what you might end up doing is putting the entire transcription in the appendices. You don't have to do that. It could be just something that you decide to do. Now, what else do you notice within here? There's all brackets, there's italicized, there's square brackets again, there's dots. So all these mean something. You have to tell the reader at some point, maybe again in the appendices, you can refer them to that and tell them what all these transcription conventions mean, okay? Because when people talk, it's not that simple, is it? They pause, you sometimes can't understand what they're saying, people talk over the top of each other, and that all has to come out in the transcriptions. Okay. All right, so hopefully that will give you an idea of some structuring. What about using passive voice? Is sentence 4, don't we have to take the authority? Sentence 4, is that back up here? Oh, no, you mean down here. Sorry, I haven't numbered these ones. So, which sentence is it, Ganeen?
It was in the first page. So we decide to present it in 3 sections.
Yeah, the findings are presented.
Don't we say that I am presenting, or I present the findings in 3 sections?
So you're talking about using first person, are you? Or
First person, or
yeah, if you want to, but this study didn't use first person. Yeah, active voice is better than passive voice. It depends. It depends where you're up to, but let's keep moving. The findings are presented in 3 sections is okay. This didn't use first person. All right, let's go back to our slides. So I'm just going to stop our share for a second. There is a lot of background noise, unfortunately, where I am at the moment. So I am sorry about that. All right, let's keep on moving. All right, everyone can see my screen okay? All right, so synthesizing and critically discussing. So here we are talking now about our discussion section. So what's the difference between your discussion and your conclusion? So the discussion is explaining and interpreting the research findings, and it's setting the scene and planting the seeds for your conclusion, which is summarizing the whole study. It's restating the major findings and the contributions and the significance. So it's basically a bit of repetition, and also remember, it's the mirror of your introduction. Okay, so it's the final part of the story, whereas your discussion, it's really, you know, the meaty part, let's say. Sorry if anybody's a vegan. It's really the main crux of everything you've worked on to get to this discussion part. So what's the purpose? The purpose is to explain the results that you've laid out in your beautifully clear and logical way and put them in the context of your field of study. That's where your literature comes in. You need to compare and contrast to the previous research and really highlight how valuable your insights are. Don't forget about your stakeholders. So who are the people who have something to gain from this knowledge? It could be your participants. It could extend further out from that. The discussion really is where you answer your research questions. So make sure that is very, very clear. Whether you do it as this is the question and here's the answer will be up to you. Remember, you had research gaps, didn't you, that you found? So are you need to say how you filled or contributed to those. And it's just setting up all your arguments as well and combining your field of study and their previous studies and your own research and putting them into the one context, because you're going to have implications either in your discussion or in your conclusion for theory, for policy, or for practice. So you're planting that seed as well as setting up the potential research that you can see that still needs to be done. Your research won't necessarily fill the whole gap. So if we're thinking about our thesis or our PhD as a journey, I know that's a bit cliche, but it is, I would say that your discussion is your destination. You know, yes, of course, the conclusion is the end, let's say, but when we go on a journey, don't we end up back where we started? So that would be your conclusion. I don't know. What do you think? Is the discussion the most important chapter? Arguably, I would say yes. Your methods chapter is pretty important too, let's say, but really the discussion is where it's all coming together and all of your really hard work and all your time and your effort, this is where it's coming to. You began at the beginning, hey, there's this problem, someone needs to find out about it. So your research is doing that. So, and not only is it progressing the reader's understanding, as we said before, when you're presenting all your evidence, it's progressing your understanding as well. Remember, you're an expert in this. You're the one that's the closest to the data, okay? And the discussion is also the culmination and the final demonstration of your research skills, which is why you're here, to build those research skills. You're an early career researcher who is developing all the skills that you need. So this is the demonstration of that. So super, super important. Although I don't want to put too much pressure on you. I want you feeling confident. All right, so how are we getting started? As we keep saying, don't wait, please write everything down or figure out your way, whether you record yourself and your musings and your thoughts. It's all going to be useful in the end, even though it doesn't all make it into the actual thesis. Try and keep the structure simple. And as we said before, if you can marry up the results in the discussion and even your other chapters and have that common thread all the way through and similar kinds of subheadings, that's going to really help your reader and also help you as well. With your research questions, start writing dot points as soon as you can about your possible responses to the research question. You're going to have so many thoughts, so write them all down. And as always, you need that paragraph that we just looked at to remind the reader, this is the aim, this is my research design, and this is how this discussion section or chapter is going to be presented. So staying on track. So you've made your start, you've done all your data analysis, you're writing all of your drafts, you know, you just need to keep going backwards and forwards and reading and rereading, going back to your other chapters and saying, you know, is this all connecting up? And you have to stand back and look at the big picture. As we keep saying, mind maps, matrices, tables, you want to organize and find all those relationships, find where we can put things together, find where there's completely different subheadings that we need. And ultimately, really the most important thing in your discussion is, why should we value this research? What's significant about it? That really has to ring through with all of those key findings that you're going to discuss. You might find yourself speculating. That's okay in your drafts and in your thoughts, but by the time we get to that final thesis, there can't be speculation. You need to be able to use your hard evidence to support your claims. So your critical analysis, this is all about your critical thinking. You're doing it as we speak. Your critical thinking, we do all the time, all right? But when it comes to original research, it can be really hard, and we sometimes get a bit daunted if we're on the right track. So trust yourself. You have that deep understanding of your whole topic, of everything. You're the one that collected the data. You're the one that's managed it and analyzed it and slept with it, you know. So you know, make the judgments, use your evidence, and be brave, okay? Think about how your results confirm what other studies say, how they contradict, challenge, advance current knowledge. And then what are the actions? Remember, you're planting the seed about those recommendations that somebody needs to implement, right? So what are those actions going to be, and who will take those? You need to start to put that down into that's where the discussion is, culminating it all and starting that thread of, okay, well, now we know this, what are we going to do about it? These people are in the best position to make this specific response. Do you have some examples of what should never go in the conclusion, but to keep in the discussion? That's a good question. Basically, the conclusion, it has nothing new. So the conclusion is everything from the other chapters, so to speak. With your discussion, it's putting it all together, putting the previous research, your research, and putting them into the context and explaining what your results mean. And then your conclusion is a summary to make very clear, okay, this study found these specific findings and this is what we need to do from here. Okay, I hope that answers that question. So you have to use the evidence. I keep on saying that that's why your presentation of the data is really important, that's clear. So remember as well, with your discussion and with your critical thinking and with your evidence, what are you demonstrating? You're demonstrating that you are an excellent researcher and that you can identify a problem, you can implement a robust research design to investigate it, you can analyze, come up with findings, and then from that, come up with some implications that are based on the evidence you collected. So we're constantly reflecting, going backwards and forwards and looking at all of the possibilities. What are the new insights? Are they new? Are they an extension? Were they unexpected? Have you solved a controversy, or have you raised another controversy? That would be cool. Are there new gaps, new avenues of research that weren't even looked at previously? You know, it's possible you've raised a whole lot more questions, maybe answered some, but raised even more, and that's okay as well. So you need to have an original and significant contribution, right? So I have highlighted that, but I also don't want to overwhelm and scare you, but you need to keep this in your mind, okay? But as we said, be brave, all right? You know the answers, you have the answers. You can be convincing by underpinning your arguments with your evidence that you've collected. So even if your insight is something small, that's okay, all right? It can still be significant. And you've posed your research questions knowing that this is a problem and something that we don't know enough about. So you will find something, all right? It doesn't have to be world peace as such. So trust yourself. So synthesizing, you've already done that in your lit review, haven't you? You've been synthesizing all of the previous studies. Now you're just adding all of your data in as well. So all the strategies you used in your lit review are applicable here in the discussion. Now remember, your discussion and lit review, they are mirrors of each other, all right? So the things that you spoke about in the lit review has to be somewhere in the discussion and related to your findings. If you find that there's something from your lit review that didn't come out, you might have to remove it. You may not, but bear that in mind. It's like your introduction and your conclusion are mirrors, okay? So are your lit review and your discussion. So you're putting your little study that's going to have still some significance, you're putting that into the place of in the context of your entire field of study. That's what the synthesizing means, all right? So you're moving back and forth between your lit review and what you found and bringing a more complete picture and helping to fill those gaps. So again, let's have a quick look at tense. So in your discussion, you're mixing past and present. The participants reported A and B. This suggests X and Y. All right, so in your results, you were just saying the participants reported something, or the respondents. You haven't put down the implication. That's where you're going to be doing that. When you're talking about previous studies, we're often in present perfect. So there's an example there. Although previous researchers have found X and Y, this study provides new insights, suggests contrary evidence. So notice the present perfect. You could say, this study has yielded further insights not previously discussed in the literature. So has yielded, you're in present perfect. Some phrases here. This finding supports, confirms, this result is significant, it's important because of this, the explanation may be, these findings align with, a similar conclusion was reached by someone else. It's okay if you have similar conclusions to the other people in the literature, but they won't all be similar. You will have contrasting ones as well. The findings revealed in this study provides evidence. What's wrong with that? No good. Mixed tenses. I put that in to trick you. Did you see it? I actually didn't. I made a mistake. The findings revealed in this study have provided evidence. Something that I see a little bit are really quite subjective words. I would encourage you to avoid those. Interestingly, participant 1 said blah, blah, blah. Why is it interesting? Who's it interesting for? It's very hard to explain why you find something interesting because your reader may not think it's interesting. Remarkably, again, a little bit subjective. So use your academic words. Significantly, importantly, something's crucial. You can't see that, or critical. Okay, you want those academic words, not the subjective words. So just to keep you not being overwhelmed, keep in mind it's a PhD, not a Nobel Prize. This is an interesting article, Mullins and Kiley. They also talk about examiners and what they think. So your reader is interested in your field of study. Remember, the examiner wants you to pass. So you're going to inform and persuade the reader of the value of your research. That's the most important thing that you need to do. You've got valuable contributions, and also, you know, you're learning a lot. All right, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to look back and say, I could have done that a little bit better. And that's okay. This is a whole journey of learning and improving your skills. So don't put too much pressure on yourself. You know, try to stay calm, do a lot of thinking and reflecting, and you will definitely come up with a significant contribution. So, main takeaways. Write down all your thoughts and insights. I cannot stress that enough. You'll forget. Honestly, you will. Keep your research aims, your problem, your questions clear. Print them out in massive letters like a big poster and stick them up on your office wall. So you're constantly coming back to those phrases and reminding yourself, why am I doing this again? Okay, and you need to make your contribution really clear. We want the reader to finish your discussion before they get to your conclusion. Finish your discussion and be thinking, this is really interesting. I can see the link, I can see the context, and I can see why this research is significant. And then your conclusion just puts that final icing on the cake, so to speak, so that it brings it all together to remind the reader, you know, this research started here and now we've come to here. So don't forget the resources for today. They go up on Blackboard, won't be till later this afternoon. Our self-assessment tool for academic writing skills is on Blackboard. I encourage you to do that one. It'll direct you to future events and help you to rate where your skills are at. The MPhil Symposium is on at 12 o'clock today. If you want to jump in and join that, you'll find that information on HiQ. We've got another writing circle on Tuesday with Tasha on academic presentations. HDR internships on Wednesday, that's a good one. And then another writing circle on the 6th of August on proofreading. So, questions and hopefully some answers as well. Feel free to pop your camera or your microphone on if you're shy, or put it into the chat, and we can do our best to answer those. What percentage of PhD projects prove the null hypotheses after all the original? Is this seen as a PhD failure? Ricky, I would say not a failure. What percentage? Good question. I wouldn't really know. Your supervisor might know. I think we really have to put the PhD in perspective. That's why I said it's not a Nobel Prize. We're not solving world peace. So it's a means to an end, your PhD. You're learning all those researcher skills. So, and even if the original hypothesis isn't going to work, there will be something that you can switch or change or come from a different angle. You know, I mean, that's part of your critical thinking. That's part of you being agile, and also why you have a supervisor to assist. But I would actually take a guess and say that quite a few PhD projects would come up with a null hypothesis. So maybe you can do a Google search of that and see if you can find some and see how they approach that. Is it okay to put again some quotes from participants in the discussion? Yep, you could, but I wouldn't put a big excerpt. I would just pull out a couple of words just to remind the reader. I did that. I had case studies in mine, and I would remind, remember that one of the case study participants said blah, blah, blah. Well, this happened as well. Yes, but keep it small, not a big excerpt in the discussion. And don't forget, you can always refer the reader back. Tell them which section to go back to if they want to be reminded of exactly what the participant said. But yes, I think that's a good strategy to keep that thread going and give the reminder. When you refer your reader back to another section, they don't have to go back. You're doing that as a bit of a courtesy, really. And if they don't want to go back, they don't have to. They can keep reading. But, sometimes they like to. So gets a bad rep. These nulls should get more often so they don't get repeated. Yeah, thanks, Jay. That's a good comment. I would guess it happens quite a bit, to be honest, and people have to change their investigation slightly. Do you have any advice on how to remain unbiased when interpreting the results? Yes, you use your qualifying language. This indicates, this suggests. You can also remind the reader, because remember, you've got in your methods, you'll have validity and reliability. When you're talking about your research design, you're going to have limitations. So depending on what sort of research design you have, if you're doing qualitative research, you would have already flagged that you've put into place some ways to minimize the researcher bias. But obviously we're human, and so we can't totally be sure, okay, if that makes sense. Another thing that people do is they get another person to check the interpretation. So you have but for a PhD, that's usually not doable because you would generally have to pay someone to do that, and it takes time. So it's part of your limitations and your generalizability. But definitely you would minimize that, and you would tell the reader how you have minimized it. But it would be probably a limitation that although you put into place all of these strategies to limit the bias, the generalizability may be affected. I found some thesis by publication do not have a discussion chapter, instead a conclusion. Yeah, I think that would occur sometimes. Depends on the field of study. How to decide which one? It's a conversation for your supervisor, would be my advice, and have a look at what other people are doing. And Nissa, is there any guidance? The percentage of your thesis is in the discussion and the findings. What do you mean by percentage of how many words, Anissa?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. That's a dodgily worded question there. So yeah, I'm just looking for guidance. Out of the total number of words, just you know, how many would be sitting in a discussion, how many would be sitting in a findings? And I know it would differ, but
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand. They would be one of you, or two, if you're putting them in separate chapters, they would be two of your bigger chapters, yes, which is why it's really important that they're structured in a clear way. But what I would also advise is if your findings chapter is getting to 20, 30, 40 pages, that's a long time with no discussion. So that's where you might have to start thinking about, is there a better way to structure this? Your biggest chapters would be those middle ones, because as we said, that's kind of the filling of the sandwich, let's say. I would say your discussion would potentially be longer, but again, it just depends. But percentage wise, so let's if we did a bit of a guesstimation, if you're looking at 80,000 words, let's say, you might have 5,000 for intro and conclusion. You might have 10 for your lit review, 10 for your methods. That's 30, isn't it? So that's still leaving you 50. Yeah. So your lit review and your method, we wouldn't probably get to 80,000 at that. Does that make sense? I hope that's, it would be, the findings in the discussion would be as long as, if not longer, than the lit review, definitely. Because remember, the lit review doesn't have your findings in there. Okay, so they would be two of your longer chapters, but be really careful that the reader doesn't have to trawl through table after table and just a whole lot of data. There has to be some meaning somewhere without doing too much discussion. And that's why people aren't always doing that traditional, here's my findings chapter, here's my discussion chapter. They're separating them out and putting them according to research questions, maybe, like we saw in the slides. Okay, cool. Okay, so do we have